Perfect. Thank you so much. So we are going to go ahead and get started this morning. First, I want to thank you for joining our monthly ECAP recap webinar. My name is Shanna Weber, and I am an environmental education specialist with the Environmental Assistance Branch at the Kentucky Department for Environmental Protection. We are so glad that you could join us this morning as we learn a little bit more about air quality permit required reporting. So we're going to talk about the annual compliance certification today, as well as the semi-annual monitoring report. But before I hand this presentation over to our guest speaker today, I do want to do just a little bit of webinar housekeeping and just give you a very short idea of what ECAP is and how we might be able to help you. So first things first, today's webinar will last around an hour. Our presenter today has said that she will try to get to all of our questions at the end of her presentation. So feel free to stick around and ask questions, and we'll try to get to those around the end of her presentation. We do ask that you stay in listen-only mode, so I don't think you should have access to your camera or microphone. But if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use either the chat feature or the Q&A feature. We'll be checking those throughout, so feel free to let us know if you have any questions. And then I also want to let you know that I will be making the recording and the presentation available to all of the attendees. So give me about a day, maybe by this afternoon, I'll get those presentations and recordings to you so you can use those as a resource, as well as I'm going to be sending, and I'll let you know of a few other resources that I'll be providing at the end of today's webinar. So just really quick, we do have a lot of information we're going to try to hit today, but I do want to let you know who we are and kind of why we have webinars like today's. So I work for the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program, or ECAP for short. And if you take anything away from my short little spiel about ECAP right now, it's that I want you to know that ECAP is genuinely here to help. So we are a non-regulatory program that can help answer any general questions regarding any air, water, or waste topics. And specifically, if we don't know the answer to those questions, we can act as a referral source and find somebody that does know the answer to those questions for you. So the program itself has two main objectives. The first is going to be helping businesses understand and comply with environmental requirements in Kentucky. And we do that in a variety of ways, from webinars and workshops to educational resources, documents, and videos, and more. And then our second goal is to provide free and confidential assistance to Kentucky's businesses. So ECAP acts as Kentucky's Small Business Environmental Assistance Program, which is housed under the Clean Air Act. So we can help small businesses with their air permitting, their required record keeping and reporting, and just kind of understand what their permit says and how to interpret that. Now, we can do a whole lot more, and there's a lot more that I could get into. But like I said, I just hope that you take away that ECAP is here to help. So if you have any questions ever, feel free to reach out to us at our hotline. I'll have those numbers on the screen at the end of today's presentation. But that hotline number actually goes to ECAP staff directly, including Allison Hall, who is our presenter today. So if you have any questions regarding air, water, and waste, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And with that being said, I am actually going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Allison. Allison is part of the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program. She is an environmental scientist consultant. And Allison, go ahead and I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Shanna. Just give me a second this morning as I try to get everything ready on here. Shanna, can you see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's webinar. Today, we are going to discuss air quality permit required reporting, specifically the annual compliance certification, the ACC, and the semi-annual monitoring report. I am going to call them ACC and SAMR for short because it's a mouthful for me. So today's webinar is just going to be a brief refresher since we don't have too much time. So I do recommend looking at those YouTube training videos that we have. We also have our in-person workshop in January for those that want one-on-one help with an inspector. So definitely take advantage of those resources that we have. We also have a representative from the field office. Today, he's here to help answer questions. I think it's Jonathan Barker today. So please save your questions for the end, and we can go back to the other slides if you want us to go back if you have any questions. Okay, so first, why do we need to submit the ACC? Well, it is a state and a federal requirement. It will be in your permit if your facility must submit the ACC. So those facilities with only a registration will not have to submit the ACC. So what is the intent of the ACC? Well, it's to help facilities confirm that they are doing proper monitoring and record keeping. It allows them to investigate their air emission sources, and it ensures that they are in compliance with all air quality regulations and the conditions of their permit. The ACC must be submitted by January 30th of 2025. And this report is going to cover January 1st through December 31st of 2024. And just a reminder, failure to submit in a timely manner is a violation of the requirement of your air quality permit. So what do you need to complete your ACC? So it hasn't changed. So those who've done this before, it's the same. But for those who are new to this, you're going to want to get a copy of your air quality permit. If you don't have one, you can download it from our eSearch website. It's a public portal. You want to take out your record keeping logs. And then you're going to want to download the annual compliance certification form. This is DEP 7007 CC. And when Shanna sends you out these slides, you can you can click on these links and download the forms from here. Okay, so if your source recently received a permit and you're not in operation, you will still submit the ACC. Just indicate on the form that it's under construction. Or if some emission points are not in operation, indicate that on the form and the date ranges when it wasn't in operation. Also, as a note, while you're going over your permit, if you've removed any emission points, you might want to submit a permit revision or modification. Sometimes this can drop you down a permit level. Opposite is also true. If you're reading your permit, filling out your ACC, and you notice you have new equipment that is emitting air pollution, you must submit a permit modification or revision. Technically, you need to be doing that before the installation of any equipment. Okay, so before we review the form itself, check out DAQ's permit required reporting page. You can find a direct link here to the form. It has also instructions and an explanation of submittal requirements. Minor modifications to the form are allowed, so you can add pages, you can add lines to the tables to accommodate your permit conditions and requirements, but significant changes, those must be pre-approved by your regional office. So this slide just shows you what the ACC form looks like. So if you look at the top, a lot of this information will be about your facility. Some of this will also be coming from your permit. And so boxes 1, 3, 4, 6, those are basic information about your business. Also, this is not where you're going to update any technical contacts. Anytime you need to update, you'll have to contact the division directly so we can change it in our database. Let's see. And then box 2, 5, and 7. agency interest number, permit number, the EIS number. This is all found on the front page of your permit. And this is just an example of the top of the form filled out. And you'll see in box 8, it has a question regarding any emission units that are not in continuous compliance. Please answer this accordingly. So also in box 8, the reporting period will be January 1st through December 31st of the preceding year. So this will be 2024 when you're submitting in January. So unless you have a special case of a new permit or permit revisions in which you'll want to adjust your reporting period to reflect the date those permits were effective. Also, I wanted to note a lot of people write over old forms. You have to double check you're putting the right date range on this form. So box 9 of the form is the signature block. This is the statement which the responsible official will sign. It states that the information is true, accurate, and complete under penalty of the law. And false statements are punishable by fines or imprisonment. So having a responsible official sign this gives greater assurance and responsibility of a facility's compliance with air quality regulations. And if you're not sure who the responsible official is for your facility, you're going to want to check this link here. Okay, so there are 3 different sections for the ACC form. The first one will be 10A, emission units in compliance. Then we have 10B, those subject to future compliance dates. Then we have 10C, 1 and 2. Those are emission units that are not in compliance. So first, we're going to go over 10A, and we're going to go over a couple of examples, and we'll have an example of a permit and how we pulled that information from it and how we filled it out. Okay, so hopefully you have my slideshow maximized on your screen so you can read these little details. So this is section 10A, and it's used to document emission units compliance for the entire reporting period. And so most of this we're pulling from the permit. You just need to know where to look. So the first column is for identifying the emission units, and you'll have to list what the permit ID number is. And this is consistent throughout the forms. So you'll want to use the numbering system set by your permit. And so you'll see the example here and where we pulled that emission unit from. So the second column, this is for permit conditions or applicable regulations. Here you may list the permit conditions found in section B2A of your permit, or you'll list the actual regulations from the KAR. And this yellow box here just shows where we found these regulations. And this is a copy of the permit that we're using for our example today. So it's a spray coating operation. Note that each unit will have multiple pages of information. So, and many facilities will have multiple emission units. So you'll have to make several lines for that. Okay, so in the third column, we're adding spray coating operations here. It should be listed in your permit. Other examples can include boiler number 1, co-boiler, anything like that. Just copy what's written exactly how it is in your permit. So in column 4, it's asking for the permit limit or requirement. So this can be a pollutant limit. So this in our example, we're using particulate matter, or it could be an operating limit, something like that. And there may be several permit limits for a single emission unit. And you're going to need to make several rows to incorporate all permit limits and requirements. So this facility is going to add rows for any opacity limits. Okay, in this column, it's asking for the actual emissions or status requirement. So this could be actual usage or another parameter to be measured against the limit. And so in our permit, it did not give us a way to calculate PM. It just made sure that you're following the compliance method to make sure you're under the 2.34 limit. So check what your permit says. There might be a calculation for PM in there. Okay, then in column 6, so this is the method for determining compliance. So in this example, they have the filters in the paint booth and they check on those filters intermittently to ensure compliance. And your compliance demonstration method will be listed in the permit. For example, it could be weekly visible emissions that are monitored and recorded. Make sure you include whether the method you used is continuous or intermittent. So if it provided continuous or intermittent data. And we're going to go over what that is in the next slide. And then in the second row here, you can see we just added another example from the permit. So it's spray coating operations, the same emission unit, but different requirements. Okay, so let's go over the difference between continuous and intermittent data collection. So continuous data collection means that the data is collected and analyzed once every 15 minutes. This would only qualify if you have a continuous emissions monitor or analyzer. If there are any gaps in the data, the method can't be considered continuous. So intermittent collection is all other methods that are not continuous. And for most facilities, this is the method that you'll be using. So one very common intermittent method includes those visual emission observations that are recorded weekly. Okay, so the next section, we're going to be talking about those subject to future compliance states. So emission units subject to future compliance states. Most facilities will have nothing to put here, and that's fine. But we're just going to go over it quickly. So here in this example from 2016 for changes to boiler requirements, it shows how the permittee shall demonstrate compliance and the date by which compliance is required. If your facility is not subject to future compliance dates, you're going to make a simple statement to that effect. We don't recommend leaving any section of the forms blank. So this is just an example of what it should look like if you are not subject to any future rules or requirements. Okay, and then the next section, we're going to be discussing emission units when they are not in continuous compliance. Okay, so what is the difference between continuous and intermittent compliance? So continuous compliance means that based on all the data available, whether it be monitoring data or your record keeping data, there's no evidence or reason to believe that your source was not in compliance. A source can claim continuous compliance even when the data you used collects intermittent data. That is fine. So intermittent compliance means that there's evidence or reason to believe that the source was not in compliance at all times for a given term. So failure to meet any permit condition or requirement is considered intermittent compliance and should be listed on 10C1 and 10C2 to reflect those units out of compliance. And you'll need to repeat a single line for every permit limit. Do not combine the permit limits for a single emission unit. You might have to add several rows for a single emission point if the emission point was out of compliance or if records show that the unit was not in compliance. And we'll go over a couple of examples of this in the next couple slides. This is just a note that if you take a look at 10C, it looks a lot like 10A. So just double check you're filling out the right table. Okay, so here we have some examples filled out. So this facility didn't meet the requirement for recording daily pressure drop readings. So they said in June 2024, they have no records of it. So their compliance method is to record that daily, and that produces intermittent data. And so because they don't have data for June, this emission unit is an intermittent compliance. The next example in the row below, the facility didn't submit their ACC on time. They submitted it on February 5th instead of January 30th. And they just wrote that here that the ACC was submitted to the regional office annually. And so it was not in continuous compliance since it was late. Okay, so here are some examples on how to fill out 10C Part 2. So don't forget, so if there's record keeping data that wasn't recorded, you should report that. It's a good idea to put the date in which the errors occurred, and you should list why the error occurred and how it will be corrected or prevented in the future. So you can take a look at this and just look at these examples whenever these get sent out. Okay, so that is it for the ACC. We're going to move on to the SAMR before we take any questions. So what is a semi-annual monitoring report? If the answer's in its name, it's just a report due twice a year, and it's a summary of all monitoring requirements. So this can include things such as production rates, fuel use, emission rates every month. You'll need to provide specific but summarized documentation with your semi-annual monitoring report. Okay, what's the due date? It's due every January 30th and every July 30th, and it's going to cover the previous 6 months. Another note, just make sure you get those in on time. So we get this question often for those doing it the first time. There is no form for the SAMR. There's no standard format either. So main thing you want to do is you're going to have to include a cover letter, which includes all the important information that is provided on the front page of your permit. So anything that identifies the facility, your AI number, permit number. Don't forget to include the reporting period. Summary tables or spreadsheet with monitoring data might be the best format when submitting data for this. It's really up to the facility. Every facility is different. Just a note, if you're sending things by snail mail, try to make sure you don't put a lot of color, just because we'll have to scan that into our system. Okay, so this is just an example of a SAMR cover letter. So it should look something like this with your address, AI, include your reporting period here. And so what do you want to include? So your permit lists out all the monitoring requirements for each emission unit. So you're going to want to summarize all of that for the semi-annual monitoring report. And there's so much variability on how the permits are written. So some of those requirements for your SAMR might be listed in your reporting sections of your permit. Definitely follow what it says. If they say report your record keeping logs, submit that with your SAMR. So what do you include as far as detail that is required? Clearly list out each emission point and the monitoring requirement, the frequency of the requirement, and then indicate whether the monitoring was performed with the required frequency under the limit that is specified by the permit. You're going to want to make sure to indicate any and all deviations from the monitoring requirement for that reporting period. So list out any deviations, include dates, exceedance values, and corrective actions taken in order to return to appropriate levels throughout the year. I mean, just to note, excess emissions are to be reported to your regional office. It's recommended to keep a log of deviations and complications, as well as when you report it and to whom throughout the year. This will help you comply with your regulations, and it'll make it faster to complete these reports. I know there's a ton of text on this slide. Take a look at this later if you need more help, if you're confused about the SAMR. This is just how one facility can do it, but it's different for every facility. This is just an example. So here they have the body of the cover letter that lists all the monitoring requirements, the permit conditions, and it certifies that all records and limits were maintained for this reporting period. So do you need to actually submit the monitoring logs or operator logs? Not necessarily. You might, if you're required, if it says it in your permit, then yes, of course. But the SAMR is still a summary of your requirements. So you might not have to submit the daily or weekly logs, but state that the logs were maintained in accordance to the permit requirement, and you'll list any deviations to the permit. Yet sometimes your permit or your inspector might request actual logs. So that might be the best way to represent your data. If you have to do any 12-month rolling totals, those would be good to include. There's just so much variability among sources and operations. And don't forget that the SAMR needs to be signed by a responsible official. And again, the slide just shows who that person will be for your source. Okay, so things to remember: report clearly, report logically, in a format that is easily understandable. Be sure to include units to all the values, pounds versus tons, huge difference. And please avoid using any industry jargon or acronyms. We see a lot of facilities. We're not familiar with those acronyms, so just spell it out to us. It really helps us when we're reading these reports. Okay. When it's time to submit the ACC and SAMR, we do prefer EECE forms, but you can still send it directly to your regional office. We ask that you do not send it to Frankfurt central office. Send it to your regional office. Let's see. And don't forget, if you're Title V source, you'll be sending that to the EPA in Atlanta. Include all deviations to the permit. Include things if you have been issued an NOV, any malfunctions, exceedances, record-keeping gaps, things like that. And then these are the due dates again. We talked about this so many times before, but they are due January 30th. And then the second SAMR will be due on July the 30th. Mhm. Yes, and Jonathan says, please take advantage of the electronic submittal. Yes, definitely. That is the preferred method. And here is a link to eForms on this slide. You're going to be looking for form number 34. Okay, for snail mail, this is just a link to the regional offices if you need an address. It is also listed on your permit. And again, it says don't send it to the central office. And please get these in on time. The regional office is responsible for tracking and reviewing these reports. Okay, so for the next couple of slides, we're going to briefly go over eForms because we do get a lot of calls on this every year. Sometimes facilities only submit twice a year on eForms, so they forget. I just wanted to remind everyone we are not on Kentucky Online Gateway anymore. We have moved to our own website, and the link I provided in a previous slide. So when you get to eForms, you're going to want to go to the Forms tab at the very top where the green arrow is showing. And we're going to look for a DAQ Field Operations Branch electronic submittal, form number 34. And you're going to have to click that little plus sign to open the form. Okay, so in this top section, you're just going to be entering basic information about the facility, including the AI number, site name, address, submittal info. Okay, and here you are going to upload your files to these spots, the SAMR and the ACC at the bottom. I do want to note, don't attach until you're ready to submit. I did get a call yesterday from somebody saying that they submitted the SAMR 6 months ago, but what happened was they hit save, the form disappeared, they submitted it. We got a blank submission. So I had to tell them, oh, nothing was reported. Even though you submitted it, there was no attachment. So they had to go in and submit the previous SAMR. So hit save when you're ready to submit, or these files will disappear. Do we need a login? Yes, you'll need to have an account on eForms to submit to DAQ. So, and we will include that later. We can include that in the email. We'll give instructions for those that are new to eForms. Okay, then these are just some tips on eForms. I mentioned this already. You'll hit save and it'll disappear. So don't attach files until you're ready to submit. eForms will time out after 45 minutes. You might get an error message when that happens. You'll see something that says you have an eForm open. You'll have to go back to your dashboard and open that incomplete eForm there. We do get that call every year. And you cannot use the eForms website if you need to submit to the EPA. If you want a link to their electronic submittal, it's here through Sedri. And that's only for Title V major sources. So I would like a copy of my old submittal. We get that question a lot. So you can check your eForms account, whoever submitted it last time, you can download it from there. Another way to get a copy submitted previously, you can contact us or your field office and we can give you a copy. But I just want to make sure that you are the listed air permit contact or a listed official, or we can't provide that. You can also submit an open records request to our cabinet if you need some reports. Okay, so who to contact. If you have an eForm issue, like your password isn't working, you get an error message online, you are going to be emailing depassist@ky.gov. If you need to delete an eForm, anything like that, they will help you with. Specific ACC and SAMR questions, if it's very specific, we do recommend you reach out to your regional office. They are very familiar with your permit. General questions, if you need help on submitting, where to find the form, need help with the tables, things like that, we can help you. Next year, we'll have more staff to give more detailed help. But right now, I'm the only one in the office and I answer questions on air, wastewater on top of my regular duties. So I do recommend reaching out to your regional office for any very specific questions first, and then any general questions can come to me. So let's say you need to update your air permit contact, email Samantha Hoffman at ky.gov. I think everyone that's in this meeting probably has up-to-date contacts since you were notified of this webinar. But we do have a lot of rejected emails and we sent out postcards and we had a lot of returns. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Okay, so if you have any questions, this is the time. We can discuss it now. I do recommend if anyone's interested in the workshop, if they need a lot of help, definitely come to that. It's in Frankfurt. We have a lot of space open still. So, okay, I'm done.
Great. Thank you, Allison. And Jonathan, I also just allowed your microphone. If there's anything you would like to add, feel free to. But other than that, if anyone has any questions, now is the time. We would love to answer any of them. So feel free to use the chat or the Q&A feature.
I would like to thank everybody for coming out today and being part of the webinar. The annual compliance report and the semi-annual monitoring reports, those are the most important reports that you're going to do all year long. And I've put a couple of things in the chat line there. One of the big ones is, um, let's see, I didn't put that in there actually. If you if you have to submit a report to EPA, just remember that submittal to the EPA does not constitute submittal to the state. We've had some facilities make that mistake before and say that they've, submitted to EPA and didn't think they had to submit to us, but those have to be submitted to us as well, since we don't share a database with EPA. And I will say that also that your regional office staff, um, don't think you're bugging them. They love to hear from facilities, particularly if you have questions, because if you have questions that they can answer, that means your facility is going to operate better and easier, and compliance is going to be much easier to achieve, and that makes their job easier. So they're really happy to field any questions that you have for them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, he definitely knows what he is talking about. And like he said, I feel like number one thing is just to ask questions because, we're here to help and your inspectors are here to help. So feel free to ask questions. Speaking of questions, we got a few in the chat. How do you register for the workshop? In the email that I'm going to send out after today's presentation, I will have a link of all of our upcoming events. Our in-person workshop will be in Frankfurt at the Energy and Environment Cabinet Building. It's free for anyone to attend. The first half of the day will be presentations on ACC and SAMR's submittals and just understanding your air permit. And then we'll also have individuals from our field offices come in and help provide some more one-on-one resources and one-on-one help with filling out ACC and SAMR's. So that's definitely something that I recommend everyone attend if they can. I will say it is a limited capacity, so if you know you can make it, I would go ahead and register as soon as possible. But yes, I will be sending out the link for that registration with the presentations. Great question. It looks like we have another question. If you have questions about the way your air permit was written, what is the best way to get clarity on that?
Well, Sarah, the best way to get clarity on that is when the permit, actually, we'll talk about two things, the time and the person. Uh, when you have questions about your permit, the perfect time to take those answers to the permit writer is when you get the draft of your permit. So any type of clarification, can be made, officially at that point on the permit, so that the language is a little bit easier to understand. After the permit is already issued, I would recommend you talk to your field inspector and also the person that wrote the permit. So just call um, the permitting branch, ask for the particular section that you're dealing with. If if you have a chemical permit, if you have a minerals permit, if you have a surface coating permit, those are all different sections, and you should have the contact information for the person that actually wrote your permit, so they're happy to answer questions and to clarify things that they put on your permit. And one good thing to remember too is that sometimes it's difficult when you're talking about, how your facility operates and how a particular piece of equipment operates. Sometimes it's hard to translate that into the forms that permitting has, in your permit application. So it's also good to, reach out to the permit writers and explain the process to them. Um, I can think of one particular example was for a natural gas-fired burner. Well, if you permit for a natural gas-fired burner, as long as you use natural gas, then you are considered to be compliant with particulate matter. However, the translation for this burner wasn't what we were expecting. The burner actually heated a bar, and the bar had score marks on it. So hot dogs would roll under the burner, and the burner, or would roll under the bar. The burner heated the bar scored the meat, and the particulate matter that was coming up wasn't from the actual natural gas fired burner, but it was from the actual process of charring the meat. And that was the particulate matter that was coming out of the stack at about 50 to 60%. But from the facility's point of view, we're using a natural gas fired burner. You said we're in compliance. Well, for the burner part, you are. But, for that heated exchange between the bar and the meat, that, that's completely outside of the actual natural gas fired burner. So make sure that you explain as much as you can the process to your permit writer. That can actually lead things to both being added as emission points and also things being removed from consideration for emission points. So it goes both ways if everybody knows what's going on. Did that answer your question? Contact permitting.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Let's see, a few other questions. Are we going to receive a link for this recording? Yes, I will be planning on sending out the link for the recording with the presentations. So I will be sending all of that out. Yes, good question. Next question from Brad. Do I need to complete a Kentucky Online Gateway profile to submit the online forms? So Allison kind of touched on this earlier, and Allison, if you want to hop in and answer it, go for it. But we actually this past July switched over from Kentucky Online Gateway. So you will no longer need a KOG profile to submit EECE forms. If you did have a Kentucky Online Gateway account in the past, all of that has been transferred over to EECE forms. So what you will need to do is go into EECE forms. Again, that link is in the presentation from today, and you will just request a new password. So you'll it's a really weird situation, but you'll hit the I forgot my password. That will send you an email to update your password. And once you do that and log in, all of your previous forms should be in your account, and you should be good to submit from EECE forms. So let me know if that might be a little confusing, but I think you asked earlier, I did include a video and a module about creating an eForms account on my PowerPoint. So when you get those sent out, that will be linked as well.
Also, if you go to the online submittals link that I posted above, you see that I put a little screen capture on there. On that page, there's also a guidance document that will run you through the eForms process. So there's also how to create an eForms account and how to navigate your eForms account. Those are all right at the top of the page under updates to the eForms experience. So you can definitely refer to those guidance documents to help you out with the process.
Yes, there's a lot of documents out there to help out. But again, if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we can help with those more specific questions. But I don't see anything else in the chat right now. I'll give it a few more minutes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I might be able to let you unmute yourself if it's a more detailed question. So maybe raise your hand or just let me know and I can try to do that. But we'll give a few more minutes just in case anything rolls around. I'm not seeing anything pop in the chat, but as Allison and Jonathan have both said, please reach out if you have any questions. We really are here to help. So feel free to let us know if you think of anything on the screen right now. This is a part of the presentation that I'll be sharing with you. I have listed just a few of our online resources that are linked. They include an ACC module, a semi-annual monitoring report module, and a module specifically on how to submit, as well as our general eForms account videos. I really recommend that you go in and check those out if you have any questions or just need a refresher on anything else. So those will all be in the email that I send out later. And then before we leave today, I did want to let you know of some of our upcoming events that ECAP is offering. As a lot of you know, we host our ECAP recap webinar monthly. So we do have our January and February webinars scheduled. In January, we are going to have a speaker come and talk about Kentucky Area Emissions Survey. And then in February, the groundwater protection plans. We also have that ACC and SAMR workshop that I mentioned earlier on January 9th in person here in Frankfurt. Like I said, if you're interested, go ahead and you'll click on the link of all of our events. It's free to register for, and we would be more than happy for that to get filled up so we can help out as many people as possible. And then I also want to mention that we have our air, water, and waste 101s happening in February, March, and April of 2025. Again, just a very introductory workshop on permitting and compliance for air, water, and waste. So that is all that I have for us today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. This is that email and phone number that goes directly to Allison. Allison's one of the people that will respond to those emails or those phone calls. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. But with that being said, I think that is all that I have for you all today. Thanks again for joining us. And we hope that everyone has a great rest of your day.